House is now in session. Minutes. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 9th April is to be deferred. Can we have the motion, please?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be now deferred.
May I second that, sir?
Question is that those minutes be deferred. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Minutes have been deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour the Deputy Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers, government notices.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Rural Development pertaining to the lease of 5,957.1 square meters of Crown land at Government Hill, St. Michael to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that those standing orders so mentioned be suspended for the rest of the day's sitting. All members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Business. Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Amendment Bill 2019.
Member for Christchurch Central.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to bring before this honourable chamber the amendments to the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2019. But with your permission, sir, I wish to also propose that order number 2, which relates to the amendment, a resolution to amend the Treasury bill limit, since it's related to the overall debt restructuring, that I propose that we do both items as a cognitive debate.
Do we have a seconder, please? The question is that those two items be done as a cognitive debate, order number 9 and order number 2.
Yes.
All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Proceed.
Thank you, sir. Now, sir, when this government took office just under a year ago, 11 months, we would have indicated almost immediately to the country, sir, that at that time, as the Barbados economy had found itself in a real crisis, that the first order of business, sir, was to create a level of stability before the underlying problem, sir, could be addressed effectively. And so much of the work, sir, that this government has focused on over the past 11 months would have been to provide, sir, that measure of stability for Barbadians to be able to go about their business as they seek to move forward, sir, under a new administration. And so, having identified, sir, that the public debt of Barbados was one of the key obstacles, sir, with respect to the government's ability to be able to supply relatively good public goods and services of the standard that the public would expect, sir, given that much of the government's revenue was being expended increasingly, sir, to servicing debt, that we felt, sir, as we still do now, that we needed to address that. And in October of last year, sir, we came to this honourable chamber and we announced officially to the country, sir, what the offer with respect to the domestic portion of our debt would be. And at that time, sir, we would set out a series of new instruments that will effectively, sir, bring about a level of greater certainty with respect to anyone who would hold public debt of Barbados. And so this amendment today, sir, is just to make a few provisions for a few adjustments that we would have made since that initial offer. Because, sir, at the time of the exchange offer with respect to the domestic debt restructuring, the bonds, the newly structured bonds that we would have issued, sir, would have been designed specifically to make sure that, on the one hand, we would move, sir, over the next 15 years, which is to 2033, sir, bring our debt to GDP to 60% from 157% where it was when we took over officially, sir, in May of last year. And all of what we have been able to achieve so far, sir, is to make sure that we put our overall debt trajectory down, sir, back to a level of sustainability such that the taxpayers of this country, sir, the taxpayers of this country, as well as the government, will be able, sir, to manage our affairs in a way, sir, that is consistent with good governance. And so the provisions that we seek to bring today, sir, relate to, first and foremost, to provide for instruments issued to the Central Bank of Barbados. B, to provide for a more equitable treatment for estate and legacy accounts and individuals who hold debt issued by state-owned enterprises. C, sir, to authorize the government of Barbados to prepay all or part of the principal and interest accrued on a specific debt instrument. And D, sir, other related matters. Now, sir, one of the central tenets with respect to the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, sir, as I said, was in the first instance, sir, to create a measure of stability. Because without stability, sir, all the reforms that we intend to pursue will not take root, sir, unless the economy is in fact, sir, stable. And as you would know, sir, anyone who may watch any of the TV series where medical services are being provided, oftentimes, sir, when you're a surgeon and you are going in to do one specific thing and something happens to the patient that creates a measure of uncertainty, one always has to make sure you address those immediate issues before you can continue with the operation for which you intended to do. The debt, sir, of this country is pretty much one of those areas, sir, where you have to be constantly addressing in order, sir, to keep the economy stable. And therefore, over the course of the next 14 years, as we seek to bring total debt down to 60% of GDP, sir, it is the maintenance, sir, of that stability which is required to be able to ensure that the overall reforms that we intend to take under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, that those reforms can in fact be delivered. And the Prime Minister, sir, in her budget speech just a few weeks ago indicated to the country that the primary message, sir, is to stay the course. stay the course. And staying the course means, sir, that you can't take your eye off the mission because there's still a lot of work to be done. And the work certainly that we have been able to achieve, sir, and conduct over the past 11 months was essentially, sir, to stabilize and give certainty, relative certainty, sir, with respect to Barbadians being able to carry out their business in the economy. One of the key things, sir, with respect to the provisions that are before the House today relates to the fact, sir, that after the exchange offer in October of last year, the Ministry of Finance and the government, sir, undertook to, in a sense, sir, prepare. Specifically, sir, pensioners, as you are aware, sir, that in November of last year, we would have given a cash payment of up to $20,000 to pensioners, those persons 60 and above. In effect, sir, altering what the terms and conditions in terms of what we would have issued in October. And then we subsequently, sir, at the end of March of this year, then made an additional payment of up to $30,000, sir, such that anybody who would have held any government debt, sir, up to $50,000 would have been liquidated in cash, sir, up until the end of March of this year. Part of the reason that we felt that that was important, sir, was on the one hand, given that the terms and conditions were changed with respect to pensioners, obviously persons who would have worked, sir, and contributed to the development of this country, that the government felt, sir, it was important to make sure that those persons who are no longer working, who rely pretty much on a fixed income, sir, that we could advance to those Barbadians, those pensioners, monies in cash up front, sir, to make sure that they wouldn't be disadvantaged by the overall impact of the debt restructuring. And so to the extent, sir, that our debt service was too high, the interest rate, sir, being charged because of the multiple downgrades that would have occurred under the previous administration. The cost of servicing that debt, sir, was unsustainable. But as we resort to restructure the debt, sir, we were very conscious that persons living on a fixed income, as our pensioners are, that these provisions that we are asking the House, sir, to pretty much put on a legal footing with respect to the prepayment clause, that we felt, sir, that that was important to make sure that those persons, those pensioners on a fixed income will get as much relief as the government can afford to give them with respect to their holdings of government paper. Now, sir, to the extent that we've been able to do that, and as I said, sir, we've been able to put some up to $50,000, depending on the value of securities that pensioners would have been holding up until just prior to the debt exchange offer last year, that over the course, sir, of the next 42 months, those persons, and starting certainly from today, yes, today's the end of April. From today, precisely, over the next 42 months, sir, pensioners, as well as other bondholders specifically, will be receiving, and I want to focus and zero in on the pensioners. For those pensioners, sir, who hold up to an additional $200,000 with respect to a government paper, will from today, sir, receive monthly payments over the next 42 months to allow for that debt, sir, that the government of Barbados owe to be paid down. And all of this, sir, as we seek to put cash back into the economy, sir, will give those pensioners greater certainty with respect to them being able to manage their affairs. Now, sir, this is important, and it's very different from certainly what obtained before, because under the previous system, sir, interest usually would have been paid semi-annually, and so a person would have to wait, sir, every 6 months or so to be able to get some interest. If they held Treasury bills, sir, Treasury bills typically would mature every 90 days or 180 days, depending on which version of the Treasury bills they would hold. But what we are saying, sir, is that the government of Barbados, every month, for the next 42 months, for any pensioner, sir, who holds more than, who would have held, sorry, more than $50,000 in debt, will effectively, sir, receive a monthly payment for the next 42 months, which will seek to liquidate, sir, any additional holdings of debt that the pensioners would have. And so, therefore, the prepayment clause that's in here, sir, is just on the one hand to put on a legal footing, sir, and to validate those monies, sir, that we would have already paid out under the debt restructuring. But certainly, sir, what it does now is that as the government seeks to, under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, that the notion of prepaying now must become, where possible, in the minds of bondholders, that the government is committed, sir, to reducing as quickly as possible. We've mapped out 2033 as the point at which we are able to bring overall debt, both domestic and external, to 60% of GDP. And so, therefore, sir, the government is in the business, sir, certainly, sir, over the next 4 years of ensuring that we can prepay as much debt as we can to put the economy, as well as the overall macroeconomic picture, on a much sounder footing. And so, therefore, the notion of prepayment, sir, I think will become a new feature, certainly, for the foreseeable future, because the government of Barbados is committed, sir, to restoring macroeconomic stability, but also debt sustainability, such that whether you're an individual in Barbados, whether you own a business or you're maybe classified as an investor, that the confidence that you can have, sir, in the management of the public finances would be such that the management of the public finances, sir, will be a critical signal with respect to providing confidence across those three areas as far as the economy is concerned. And this is important, sir, because whilst this is focused on today looking at the prepayment clauses with respect to pensioners, as we have done, the reality is, sir, is that for a number of goods and services that were supplied to the government, that arrears were built up, sir. As you are aware, a lot of those suppliers will too also, from today, on a monthly basis, also start to be paid. Because the management, sir, and the management of this process, and I must admit, sir, that as we have tried to ensure that there's a measure of openness on the one hand, but accuracy, sir, that certainly the government, through the Ministry of Finance, the BRA, the Treasury, sir, working with the state-owned enterprises has been a task, simply from the point of view, sir, that the data that we've been able to work with, sir, we've had quite a challenge in terms of making sure that what people say they were owed are actually the amounts. And to the extent, sir, that we bring some order with respect to the settlement of domestic arrears, that throughout this process, sir, the payment of these arrears, and we've rolled them into, in part, the debt structure that was issued in October, that the prepayment of these arrears, sir, will see the overall debt stock of the country come down, such that we will be well on our way, sir, to being able to reduce our debt to GDP over the next 14 years to 60%. And, sir, but more importantly, these commitments, sir, I believe, sir, will provide greater levels of stability, such that the other reforms that we intend to take, sir, with respect to the state-owned enterprises as well as the broader economy can be done simply because, sir, the government is living up to its obligations, and that person, sir, will be able to plan their affairs accordingly. Now, I wish to remind the House, through you, sir, and certainly the public, that one of the salient features of the new bonds relate to the natural disaster clause. And as you would have read in today's paper, certainly the Prime Minister has indicated that we must be hurricane ready. And one of the clauses, sir, that is important with respect to being able to maintain the overall debt sustainability of the country is the provision of that natural disaster clause, which will effectively, sir, suspend in the event that there is a significant climatic event in Barbados, that the suspension of debt payments for 2 years, and using those payments obviously for government to have access to in order to help rebuild the country is an important feature, simply because a country, as we recognize, sir, as happened in St. Kitts and other places, that particular innovation allows for the country not to necessarily increase its debt whilst it's trying to respond to a climatic event. And I just want to remind the public, sir, that as we approach the hurricane season, that this is one of the key features of the new debt that we've issued. And so therefore, to the extent, and certainly, sir, we would hope that the country is as prepared as it can be in advance of any climatic event. But the reality is, sir, that what happened in Dominica just a couple of years ago, sir, and certainly in St. Kitts and Grenada in the earlier part of the 21st century, sir, are key markers in terms of a government's ability to respond when it needs to respond. And whilst we do not in any way, sir, want to be impacted by any significant climatic event, it's the government's responsibility to make sure, sir, that it puts the important measures in place to make sure that it can mitigate and respond to these things should they occur. Now, sir, what we've also done with respect to this bill as well is to, as I said, make provision for the issuing of new instruments to the Central Bank of Barbados. Now, sir, as you are well aware, and there's certainly much debate that can be had on this. The Central Bank, sir, as a former central banker myself, plays a critical role in the management of an economy. However, under previous dispensation, sir, the Central Bank pretty much found itself aiding and abetting, sir, the previous administration in creating a situation where not only the fiscal stability of this country was in question, the overall macro stability of this country was in question, the exchange rate, sir, was in question, the Central Bank in of itself, sir, its own credibility, sir, was in question. And the reality is, sir, that as a former central banker, I must say that central bankers regard their independence and they guard it very, very fiercely. But the reality is, sir, that since we came to office, we have had to legislatively make some amendments before this very chamber with respect to what the central bank can purchase by way of primary securities. And because we, sir, believe that, quite frankly, where there's need for adjustments, that they ought to come to this chamber in the full glare of the public, sir, because we are not saying that there wouldn't be some opportunity in the future, that some challenge that the government and the country may have to respond to that may require a type of intervention. But the reality, sir, is that it cannot happen in the middle of the night and suspecting taxpayers and suspecting pensioners continuing to reinvest in government paper and not being given, sir, the kind of information that they should have with respect to making decisions on their investments. And, sir, we feel that this is quite important because the provision of information, sir, to the public has to be paramount, because if people are going to make decisions about their monies and where to put their money, sir, then they must have confidence in the institutions that are charged with overseeing the affairs of the country. And the central bank, sir, is one of those said institutions with which to be that the public, sir, must have absolute trust in. Now, sir, having said that, as you are well aware, and should I remind you that at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, sir, the Central Bank of Barbados did not hold any treasury bills on its books with respect, obviously, to the government of Barbados. But by the time we took office, sir, the Central Bank had almost $2 billion in treasury bills on its books, helping to finance, sir, government's expenditure, and in effect, sir, taking the country, in a sense, in a direction which the mandate of the central bank, sir, the mandate of the central bank, which with respect to the maintenance of the exchange rate and keeping it stable, sir, is very contrary to that. And so, therefore, the central bank was involved in an operation within the open market space that was counterintuitive, sir, to its mandate of maintaining the fixed exchange rate stability at $2 to $1 US. And so, having taken office, sir, we have sought to put some measures in place to, in a sense, provide parliamentary oversight over the operations of the central bank by insisting, sir, that any purchase of primary securities should be limited to just 10% of government's expenditure. And, sir, if there's to be any deviation from that, then it means that the Ministry of Finance and the Minister responsible for Finance will have to come to this House and say to the country why you're making any adjustments to that expenditure, such that the country, sir, whether you're an investor, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an individual, whether you're a pensioner, or just someone who's working and seeking to purchase government paper as part of your portfolio planning, that information, sir, reaches the public, and that the public will be well aware through the provision of information that they then can make a choice with respect to whether they continue to invest or not. And this is important, sir, because the provision of accurate and timely information to the public is critical, sir, critical to allow persons to plan their affairs. Because, sir, we should always be in a position to give the public as much forward planning and forward certainty, such that people can go about their affairs over the course of a 2, 3, 4-year cycle, knowing that this is the lay of the land, and that you're not going to be going along very merrily and then abruptly, as we've had to certainly do with respect to pulling up the handbrake with respect to the policies that were implemented prior to us taking office last year, that people continued to do things in spite, and, well, people continue to invest in government paper simply because they were not given the information, properly so, by the appropriate authorities, which is the government itself, the central bank, on the other hand, to be able to allow persons to make those decisions. Because with the best will in the world, sir, I feel very strongly that once you are given the information that is very pertinent to you, and you perceive that the risk is palatable to you, then you understand, sir, what those risks are, and you go ahead. If the risk is not part of your appetite, then you withdraw. And I believe, sir, that that is the basis on which any government, sir, must seek to operate going forward. And so to the extent that we have brought these amendments here this morning, in a sense, sir, is this government's commitment to making sure that we bring accurate, relevant, and up-to-date information with respect to allowing the public to be able to make decisions. Now, sir, under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, the government isn't going to be issuing any new debt in the next 3 to 4 years, because we are bringing our debt down in line with the overarching strategy, which is to reach 60% of GDP by 2033. And part of the reason for that, sir, is that as we seek to settle, sir, much of the arrears with respect to not just goods and services, settle, sir, much of the tax refunds that certainly, sir, everybody, no matter where you go in this country, sir, people want to know what's happening with the 2011 to 2016 tax arrears. Now, the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, sir, indicated in the budget when those tax arrears will be settled. And part of the reason that we paid, and on this point, sir, because having paid 2017 first when we came into office, as we felt it was important, sir, for certainty and to have normal service resume, was for the persons that filed in 2018, sir, for 2017, that the establishment of that order, that you would be paid the refunds in the same year that you filed, sir, is an important signal to people that business is resuming, or normal service would be resuming. But what that did, sir, on the one hand, was to create a little bit of a gap, because people perceived that if you were only paying 2017, that somehow you wasn't going to be paying the old arrears. And even though we said that we were going to be settling that, obviously it's only when people actually receive those monies in their hands will they believe you. And the truth is, sir, the last administration did this country, sir, a disservice, because the one thing that a government, sir, must keep faith with is with the people. And when persons pay taxes, when persons supply government with goods and services, they expect to be paid. And if there's a tax refund, it should be paid. If it's supplies of goods and services, sir, they should be paid simply because they did so in good faith with what they presume is a responsible government, and responsible governments will seek to settle its obligations. And so these are things, sir, that we believe, these prepayments, if you like, the payments will continue to demonstrate the stability, sir, stability that we've sought to achieve over the last 11 months, that will continue, that people will be able to plan, sir, businesses will be able to plan their affairs with respect to the settlement of the outstanding arrears. Individuals who hold government paper will be receiving those payments over the next 3.5 years, those 42 months, sir. And with that, sir, I fundamentally believe, and certainly the government believes, sir, that it is that restoration of order, the restoration of normal service, sir, that will keep the economic stability going, such that the other reforms that needs to be done, the core operations, sir, with respect to the reforms within some of the state-owned enterprises, some of the reforms within government, central government itself, sir, that with those reforms, guided by the economic stability that we have sought to create, sir, would allow Barbados then to come out of this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, sir, far better than we found it just 11 months ago. Now, sir, so let me get back to the central bank, because the central bank is critical to the maintenance of order and stability. And as I was growing up, sir, as I said in the previous debate, central banks communicate with the public, and certainly in the past, sir, the public would have regarded the central bank through its governor, communicating with the public, sir, a confidence. But that confidence was built on perhaps the idea that the bank was looking out for them. And I think, sir, that as we seek to redo or implement these reforms, part of the central bank's job, sir, is to make sure that it does its own work to rebuild trust with the public. Now, having said that, we have, throughout this debt restructuring, we would have written off, sir, the $2 billion in treasury bills that would have been on the books, sir, of the central bank last October. But the reality, sir, the central bank, like any other institution, requires certainty in order to be able to manage its own affairs. And so to the extent that the provisions within these amendments for the central bank to itself be financially stable, such that it can oversee the critical regulations of the financial institutions in this country, that they must do so, sir, on a firm financial footing. And so therefore we have created, sir, we've created a series of pretty much T-bills that the central bank will be reserved specifically for the central bank to be able to finance itself, such that they can go about the important work, sir, of making sure that, one, their financing, in a sense, is independent of government. There's going to be a wider debate coming later, sir, with respect to the independence of the central bank, and to the extent that their independence, sir, is driven by the fact that if you want independence, then you can't be coming to government for money. And therefore, it means you got to run your affairs in a way that you don't come to the government or the taxpayers for money when you find yourself in trouble. And notwithstanding the fact that the central bank in of itself is part of the governance, the overall governance of the country, there's a cost to independence. And the reality is that the financing of the bank and the operations of the bank, sir, must be done in a manner that does not require it in the future to come to the government or to any government for financing. And so therefore, the central bank, as you would have been aware, sir, would have experienced some losses in the last few years, which is mind-boggling, because central banks typically, sir, do not incur losses. But that's a subject for a different debate. But the reality is, sir, that under the previous administration, they allowed that to happen. And in a real sense, sir, what we are seeking to do here is, on the one hand, create a level of stability within that institution that, whilst it is critical, but going forward, the management, sir, certainly within that space, will have to be enhanced such that they don't find themselves in the future in a position that they found themselves in over the last couple of years. And so the structure of the Series 8, which is being introduced with respect to the Central Bank of Barbados, for which it will be eligible, is designed, sir, to make sure that the central bank receives a stream of income such that they too can be financially independent with respect to not having to come to the government of Barbados for a subvention, as will be the case in order to recapitalize the bank from the losses that they would have incurred under the debt restructuring. Now, sir, these amendments as well, and I wish to say a few things on, whilst we are focused here on the domestic side, I just want to focus on a couple elements indirectly, sir, on the external side, because there's been much noise within the public arena with respect to the status of the external debt negotiations. Now, sir, and it's interesting because, as I said during the original debate on this bill in October, now we signed, sir, a non-disclosure agreement with the committee of persons that we are in negotiations with that hold our external debt. And obviously, as we are negotiating to come to a solution, it wouldn't be right for me to come to say to the public until we've reached some consensus and we are close. It wouldn't be right for us to be able to discuss these things out of turn. But I wish to remind the public that having seen a couple of articles appear in the public domain, that whilst we have always been committed to good faith negotiations with all of our creditors, we have always held the view that as part of this reorganization of Barbados' economy, and the Prime Minister says as well, the burden must be shared fairly. And in order to share the burden fairly, sir, it means that as we look at different elements, different economic agents, sir, and in a sense, the propensity to bear the load, sir, we have sought to make sure that we bring a level of fairness to this process. But, sir, I would remind the House through you, sir, that it is as if we are working. There are some amongst us who are working, and I say some amongst us, as in the country, sir, who are working to try to give a better deal, so to speak, sir, to external creditors than to domestic creditors. And having just had a long conversation about the central bank, sir, and how it got into that, and how it got the country into this position, it is almost, I wish to remind the public that when people come and make pronouncements to them about the status of external credit, I just want people to be reminded that as we, the government right now, we have settled the domestic part of the debt. We are working to settle the external part of the debt. And as we've said from the very beginning, sir, in all this process with respect to burden sharing, that the equity with respect to who and how much, sir, is borne by various players, that we feel is important, sir, that as part of this process, that everybody shares the burden fairly. But there are some amongst us, sir, who are seeking to make sure that somehow or the other, that others fare much better than the very pensioners who are here this morning, sir, to make provisions for the prepayments that we've already made, but to get a better deal for others than would have been meted out, certainly, sir, with respect to those holding the domestic debt. And that is unfortunate, sir. It is unfortunate. And to the extent even, sir, that there are others who are suggesting that our debt has increased, when in fact, sir, since coming to office, we have reduced our debt. It appears that persons don't take account of the fact that we have prepaid, we have restructured the domestic part of the debt. We are in fact, sir, relatively close to settling the external part of the debt, which will be restructured and in effect, sir, bring our debt to GDP down even further. But I just wish to remind the public, sir, that we must stay the course, because in order to unravel that which we inherited, sir, requires us not to be complacent in any way. And I wish, sir, to remind the public that if you imagine, sir, there's a difference between going to the sea at low tide and going at high tide. And I grew up with my grandmother, sir, and the sea ain't got no back door was my grandmother's mantra. And in our minds, sir, there was always that difference between low tide and high tide. Now, sir, we inherited this government not in high tide, sir. A tsunami was rushing in. And nobody goes to the beach, sir, when there's a tsunami. We can all go to the beach at high tide, but we cannot go to the beach, sir, when there's a tsunami. And we inherited a government where not just the beach, sir, but everything in Barbados was under a wave, sir. A tsunami. A tsunami of debt, a tsunami of arrears, a complete mess, sir. And when you look at the photographs of any place that's been hit by a tsunami, sir, in the aftermath of it, everything, sir, everything is upended. And we inherited a government, sir, and we've sought over the last 6 months to put this country back together. And as we go forward, sir, in creating a level of confidence, a level of stability, Barbadians, the decisions that we've had to take, sir, weren't decisions that we would take if we were just inheriting the government where it was high tide. It's a tsunami, sir. The place was confused. And in trying to unravel that confusion, sir, put things back in place as they were, we have had to do some serious, serious work across the length and breadth of this government. We are not ashamed that we've had to do this work, sir, because we understood what was required from the beginning to get a level of stability back to this place. And, sir, we are by no means out of the woods, as the Prime Minister would say. No means at all. And the more that we focus on maintaining the stability, sir, and allowing the other reforms to take root, sir, I wish to remind the public through you, sir, that this journey, sir, has only just begun. And whilst we may feel a little confident, a lot more confident than we did before, we cannot, sir, take our eyes off of the mission, because we cannot relax, sir, by any stretch of the imagination, because the tsunami, sir, or the impact of the tsunami is still there. And this government, in 11 short months, have sought to bring a level of stability and confidence back to Barbadians that, you know what, sir, we can clean up this tsunami. And we seek to do so, sir, across the government, in every ministry, in every department, engaging the various stakeholders, sir, simply because we are Barbadians, sir, we are accustomed to leading, and we found ourselves in a situation that we would not like to find ourselves in. But, sir, we will re-engineer this recovery to make sure that what took place, sir, in the last 10 years, and people must be committed to ensuring that they will not allow what happened in the last 10 years, sir, ever to happen again in this country. And it means, sir, that institutions who insist on independence or who wish to be independent, sir, must manage themselves, sir, in the interests of the country. And as I said, with respect to the central bank and its independence, there's going to be some legislation that will come later this year that will speak to that. But the reality is, sir, that institutions in this country must understand their role in maintaining, sir, stability. Because stability is that asset, sir, that Barbados has always treasured, whether it is political stability, whether it is economic stability, whether it is monetary stability in terms of the exchange rate, sir. Stability is the asset, sir, that this country must always make sure that it protects. And institutions must make sure that they understand their role in maintaining that stability and not act in a manner that is contrary to that. Now, sir, as I spoke and asked for your permission earlier with respect to the resolution, order number 2, which, as I said in October, sir, when I came here, that we would have increased the local loans limit by $3 billion as we were restructuring the debt to take that treasury bill stock, as well as the stock of the other arrears and what have you, with respect to rolling those into the debt restructuring on the domestic side. I had indicated to the House then that as we were increasing by $3 billion the local loans limit, that we would come back at the appropriate time in the future to lower the treasury bill limit, which currently is $4.5 billion by the commensurate amount. And the resolution that's before the House as part of order number 2 speaks to the setting of that limit, simply because, sir, if government or any government intends, sir, to increase its debt, it must send signals to the market that it is going to do so. And it cannot happen. That's part of the reason why a government cannot introduce a tax and nobody knows about it. It must come to this place, sir, and say what the tax is, what is the rate, and all of those details must be provided to the public, because you can't get up tomorrow morning and go and collect a tax somewhere. And the same way that that is important, sir, it is important that the signal is sent clearly whenever a government wants to increase its debt limit, to be able to signal to the various market participants, if you like, the government's appetite for increasing debt. And so therefore, in bringing the balance, sir, back to the overall debt stock, whether the holding of long-term securities or short-term securities as it relates to treasury bills, then that's the essence really of order number 2, which speaks to bringing the overall balance in terms of the overall debt limit back to where it should be. But certainly, sir, over the course of the next, as I said, 14 years, the government and the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, the anchor, sir, of the program is really to make sure that we hit that 60% of GDP by 2033. Other members will speak to the growth areas that will allow us to be able to achieve that. But the reality is, sir, that whilst we are focused on managing the public finances, growth obviously is critical to that equation, and so therefore we are putting the appropriate measures in place for growth to happen. Now, I cannot think, sir, of any other measure than confidence, which is critical for growth. And one of the critical elements for confidence is pretty much trust in government, that it will pay its bills on time, and communicate certainly with the various stakeholders, sir, that if there's a deviation from the modus operandi, that is communicated, and then obviously where any adjustments need to be made, that they are made. Because, sir, the maintenance of the trust and the confidence is critical, sir, to growth, such that persons can plan out their affairs with respect to being able to achieve any growth measures. And so whilst we are focused very clearly, sir, on creating that environment of relative certainty with respect to public policy and the management of public finances over the next 3 to 4 years, and it is a tough ask simply because, sir, the tsunami that we inherited, the impact, sir, and the impact is still being felt by the ordinary Barbadian. And in correcting not correcting, sir, in cleaning up, not correcting, cleaning up of the mess, it means, sir, that tough decisions have had to be made in order to create stability. The creation of the stability, sir, with respect to not just dealing with the debt, now allows us, sir, within this next phase to focus very clearly on those reforms that we all know that might have contributed to the debt situation, that we make sure that we put things in place to make sure that they don't happen again. And so we, sir, are very mindful, very, very, very mindful that there's a lot of work left to be done. And whereas to the ordinary Barbadian for whom this debate does not directly impact, because I know that the pensioners who would have received their monies in advance, sir, they understand what has happened in the past 6 months with respect to the debt restructuring. They understand what the government has been able to do with respect to the prepayments of, up until now, up to $50,000, depending on how much securities, long-term securities under the previous debt structure that pensioners held. They understand what we are doing because they've received, sir, monies in their hands with respect to the debt restructuring. But to the ordinary Barbadian, sir, who is a taxpayer, the reality is this, sir. Whenever a government seeks to increase its debt limit, and this is where the signals are important, and I want to make it abundantly clear, because when the previous Minister of Finance came to this house, sir, and increased the debt limit, people didn't make the connection. But in economics, sir, whenever you see an increase in debt, in terms of the indication from the government with respect to the debt limit, that is almost always, sir, accompanied by the increase in taxation. It may not happen in the same time period, but whatever happens, to achieve balance, sir, taxpayers will either pay more now or more later. But with the previous government, almost with regularity, they will come and increase the debt limit. And in increasing the debt limit, they then sought to increase the taxes simply because they weren't getting any growth in the economy. They never focused on proper financial management. And so to the extent, sir, that some of the strange arrangements that took place within some of the state-owned enterprises that they did obviously meant that resources were diverted from areas where they should have been spent. And so it was, and I wish to indicate to the public quite clearly that I do not recall anywhere in the Caribbean where there's been an increase, a substantive increase in debt, almost $9 billion in a decade, but yet the public services, no buses, as the member for Christchurch West can attest, no garbage trucks, as the member for St. Michael East can attest. Member for Christchurch East will indicate that much of the Mains Lane program that we had indicated needed to be done 10 years ago, sir, much of that work is still to be done. All of that work, as he said, is still to be done. But yet, sir, in a decade, having left office where the debt was about $6.5 billion, under previous government, they increased the debt by $9 billion almost. But yet, sir, some of the very services that the public should expect to accompany, because if you can raise taxes, sir, they're going to be delivering something. And to the extent, sir, that this government, under this tsunami, sir, have sought, and it's not been easy by any stretch of imagination, because to bring back some order, sir, to what I could only describe, and well, don't let me say that, it may be unparliamentary. What I can only describe, sir, as incompetent and caring, that having increased the national debt by such an amount, sir, we should not be having a discussion today, sir, about the number of transport work buses that they have. There should have been a full fleet. Our constituents, sir, should not be complaining about the collection of garbage, sir. Should never be. And to the extent, sir, that we are in the process of resolving those said problems in the context of trying to bring a level of stability back to the overall economy, sir, I want persons to to appreciate that much of the pain that is perceived, and I know that it is real, sir, it is real, but the pain, sir, the real pain, the real pain is that the previous administration, sir, had the resources to resolve many of the problems that Barbadians now, today, are feeling the impact of the neglect, sir. But those resources, sir, went places that they should not. And that's the stark reality of where we are with respect to this debt problem. And so as we seek, sir, to bring some order back to the public finances, some order, sir, back to how does a government not pay suppliers for goods and services rendered, sir? How? Barbadian suppliers, sir. And now we have people, sir, who are working to get a better deal for persons who don't live about here, sir. Yes, we need investment, but we have committed, sir, ourselves to making sure that the burden can be shared fairly. And in so doing, this government, sir, will continue to make sure that we create that balance, simply because we understand, sir, that all that is required is people to have confidence that his government is going to, in a sense, having created the rules, sir, that you play by the rules and give people the certainty that they need to be able to go about their business. And so these amendments before the Honourable Chamber this morning, and I just wish to, for the record, with respect to the prepayment clause, and at clause 3 of the bill, sir, it says the government may, with not less than 15 days prior notice, written notice, to the instrument holder, prepay A, part of, or B, all of, the principal and accrued but unpaid interest up to that date of such prepayment on a specified debt instrument. And so, sir, this is critical because we announced in November what we would have done with respect to the prepayment clauses with respect to pensioners. Those pensioners have, in fact, sir, already, some of the pensioners have already, in a sense, been liquidated of their holdings of government paper. For those who would have held less than $50,000 in government securities, they've already been paid their monies. We are committed, sir, over the next 3.5 years to dealing with those pensioners who hold up to an additional $200,000, that they will be paid in equal monthly installments, sir, over the next 42 months. By the same token, sir, for those suppliers who the government of Barbados would have owed arrears for goods and services rendered under the previous administration, similarly, sir, we are going to be paying those from today, sir, monies every month to be able to settle those arrears. And, sir, this has not been an easy road, as persons would have heard over the weekend, because having come to government, sir, having come to government and making much of the decisions that we've had to make, sir, this is the reason, sir, that we were elected. We were elected to govern, and govern we shall. And whilst our commitment, sir, is to the people of Barbados, we wish to remind the people of Barbados, sir, that staying the course and seeing this mission through to the end, sir, seeing this mission through to the end is what will bring back, sir, the pride and industry to this fair land. Now, sir, there's much more that can be said with respect to this debt. restructuring at the appropriate time. As I've said in the past, we will come to this chamber. We will provide the appropriate information to the public through yourself, sir, with respect to how this government, one, the decisions that we've made that we can't necessarily communicate in advance, but once decisions have been made, sir, we will certainly give to the public the assurance that we will then provide the appropriate information with respect to the decisions that have been made. But, sir, much has been said, certainly, about fees and all kinds of stuff as it relates to this business. But at a later date, sir, we will be in a position to address that as well. But the reality is this, sir. We are in the process of reforming and re-engineering everything that we do in Barbados. The settlement of our debt, sir, is the central component, sir, of us being able to respond to the public by the way that the government manages its finances, and the quick resolution, sir, of these debt issues provides certainty for government to be able to then focus on some of the other areas. And so, whilst this is critical, we have already started some of the other work. But in very short order, sir, we intend to bring, as I mentioned earlier, a resolution to the external side of the debt, and more information will be provided on that in terms of the potential resolution on that, in much the same way as we've done with the domestic debt. And so for persons who've just awoken to find out that we said that we were, almost a year ago, we certainly said on June 1st why we were suspending external debt payments, because it was part of the mission, sir, to create stability. Because had we, in June, sir, paid the debt service, the external debt service as due, our ability, sir, in the context of what took place certainly in that summer in trying to get the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program in place, sir, had we continued to service external debt, that potentially, sir, would have compromised the country's ability to maintain the fixed exchange rate. And all Barbadians, sir, all Barbadians bar none, do not want to contemplate ever the notion of a devaluation. And knowing that, sir, we took that decision, fully cognizant, sir, of the impact that it would have, certainly with respect to the debt restructuring. But as I said, sir, all of that was part of the decision-making to create a level of stability. And stability comes, sir, clearly at a cost. And so therefore, in containing those costs, we have sought to, on the one hand, stop the central bank from continuing the actions which is counterintuitive to that very mandate, sir, to create the stability that we would like as far as the country is concerned. We suspended those external debt payments in that context, sir, given that I don't think any government has ever inherited such a relative low level of foreign reserves from another. The management, sir, of the public finances was at its worst, sir, with respect to the ways and means that we would have inherited even a few weeks into the fiscal year. The place, sir, was a complete mess. And where we are today, while, sir, we are not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, this country, sir, can feel proud that it has a government that gets up every day, sir, goes to work, committed to the mission, sir. And all I'm asking of the country, sir, is that, as the Prime Minister said, you stay the course, complete the mission, and this country, sir, will be able to see a much brighter future. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Obliged.
I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you. Second. Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise this morning to lend my voice and my support to this bill that is before this House. I noted in the introductory remarks of the member for Christchurch East Central, the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, that he seemed to be sending me a couple signals about what should perhaps form a part of my intervention as I followed him this morning. He made reference to the fact, sir, that these amendments, as part of this overall bill, allow us to do a few things. And I want to reference two very important features. One, as the Honourable Member mentioned in his opening, has to do with the very important anchor for the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan. Now, sir, we are grappling with a reality here, and I want to be very forthright in saying that I am sure that the members in this chamber are receiving the feedback and the reflection from some Barbadians that we want to be able to get on with it. And certainly what we are doing is getting on with it. But there is a notion that and I wouldn't say what was allowed to happen, but what was done quite willfully by the last administration over the last 10 years, we should seek to sweep under the carpet and put to rest. And there is a part of that, sir, that I understand. I understand that certainly collectively, Barbadians must be dealing with a certain kind of post-traumatic stress that has come from having the last administration attempt to manage its affairs. So I understand that we would want to very quickly try and forget that which was wrought upon the people of this country by the last administration. But I want to make something very clear, sir. It is not just a platitude to say that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. That is not just something that is said. That is something that holds a lot of truth. As early as June 2018, sir, much of what the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment brought to this chamber in the way of reforms, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central mentioned some of those measures that seek to govern how the central bank acts, issues related to the Ways and Means account, things that had to do with making sure that a lot of what was done under the cover of darkness over the previous 10 years would not be allowed to happen again. I always say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that we have to govern not necessarily for ourselves now and what we know we will do, but we have to govern for the worst compulsions of mankind. And certainly we have to govern almost retroactively for what the last administration was allowed to do. This is not, sir, about blame because you have no ideas or no policy, because clearly we do and we have been implementing. But this is about pointing out, sir, that the things that happened over the previous decade, we cannot, we under no circumstances must allow to happen again. And so I want to say quite clearly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that even while we outline our plans for growth, for investment, for economic enfranchisement for Barbadians, even while we paint a picture of the future and provide the roadmap for how we are going to bring Barbadians along, every one of them, in order to get there, we have to make reference to the things, not just that brought us here, we have to make reference to the kind of governance in which we will never engage again. Let's not confuse it with not having policy. This Barbados Labour Party administration has policy, has ideas, and is implementing. Those policies and ideas and that action is what allowed us to reduce the debt-to-GDP ratio already to 125% from over 170% where we found it. That is what allowed us to increase the reserves from 400 million, barely 4.5 weeks of import cover, to over 1.1 billion, where it is today. Those ideas and policies and implementation, that is what got us there. But this notion that we are never to make reference to the lost decade, to the things that we want to keep in the back of our minds because we want to make sure that on behalf of the people of this country who gave us this clear mandate, no administration should ever be able to take us back there. And that is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we make reference to the last 10 years. It's not about blame. It is about making sure that we have reference to history so that we do not allow it to be repeated. Because, sir, there are those who, after having not been able to get themselves together to be able to implement a single coherent policy in 10 years, would want to make us believe that they're managing to regroup in just under 1 year. A group of people who could not come together to find a single plan as a government for 10 whole years. We have on the one hand, sir, she who would be queen, all of a sudden finding a voice to hold forth on economic policy. And then he who would be king, I hope the two of them don't trip over one another, offering apology on behalf of, well, I'm not sure who. So it is important for us not to forget where that group of people has taken us, because it would seem that they themselves are not sufficiently penitent, are not sufficiently reflective of what they have done to this country, such that they think Barbadians have forgotten in just under a year. And on the other hand, as the honourable member who introduced this bill mentioned, sir, we have those who were also complicit, now acting in their role as advisor to the external entities in which this government and this Ministry of Finance are in negotiation, now acting as if everything is a surprise. While this Barbados Labour Party government had to come and put things in place to allow and to hold the Central Bank of Barbados to a certain kind of behavior that did not in the past obtain, we had a central bank that acted well outside the bounds of financial discretion and financial responsibility. Now all of a sudden acting the former leader of that institution. As if, well, everything that is happening in this country with respect to its fiscal position is a surprise. How could it be a surprise? All of a sudden, holding forth on what is going to drive investment and on what is going to drive growth, as if those things were not equally true years ago when that individual was purported to be advising the then Minister of Finance. So, sir, I too am looking forward. We have a responsibility to look forward and to take the people of Barbados forward. But let us put things in perspective. And let us understand that those who have all of a sudden found a voice could not speak up in the name of the people of Barbados when their livelihoods, when their futures were being frittered away by an irresponsible government. Sir, in my brief remarks this morning, I want to highlight a few parts of these amendments, the amendments to this bill, that I think are important, that I think are visionary, and that I think provide us with a platform for the kind of growth and prosperity that the people of this country deserve. The honourable member who introduced the bill, the member for Christchurch East Central, highlighted the importance of the prepayment clause. And I want us to understand where we have come in 11 short months. We have a government that is talking about prepayment, where we had a previous administration that could not even talk about payment, that had so mismanaged the country's resources, that it had thrown its hands up in the air with respect to how it would settle its arrears, in particular to the taxpayers of this country. Sir, this prepayment clause allows us to address arrears, and it allows us to inject much-needed resources into the economy of this country. Now, let me be clear. In our paying down of arrears, we become or continue to be compliant and continue to be in line with the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan and the IMF Extended Fund Facility. And this is important. It allows us not just to make sure we meet that important anchor I referenced earlier of debt to GDP ratio, for which we have a target of 60% by 2033. So it not only allows us to be compliant and to make sure that we are focusing squarely on that target, but I want to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that these numbers, and I hope the member for St. Michael East is listening, because he importantly points out that our business here is not about numbers. It is about people. So while we have to keep that anchor and we have to meet that target, that important debt to GDP anchor for the work program, in doing so, in making sure that we meet those targets, we are doing something else that's very important. And that is quite simply putting money back into the hands of individuals and putting money back into the hands of entities, businesses, corporations that need it in order to keep the people that they employ, whether that's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 200, keep them employed and to continue to function and thrive and be a part of the inclusive growth that is planned and targeted for this Barbados economy. And I want to make specific reference or give a specific example. Now, these amendments make particular reference to debt related to state-owned enterprises, debt that is owed to and through state-owned enterprises. But in general, sir, there are consequences of not settling your bills. We all know, on a personal level, there are consequences of not fulfilling your duty to pay people. And I hate to bring it up again, but I have to because the people of St. Michael South Central sent me here to so do. There is a reason, sir, that Flagstaff Road has taken as long as it has taken. And it's still, regrettably, not finished, but I am reliably advised, and I know the member for Christchurch West is a reliable man, that works will soon resume. But there's a reason. When an entity, a small contractor, a small business is owed money, that is money that that entity needs to keep its business going. So, you know, we make all kinds of assumptions about what the private sector looks like and what the private sector is able to do. But if I am not being paid, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I cannot continue to operate. And so what we had happening with much of the road infrastructure, sir, across this country, is that those contractors that were engaged to fix those roads, having not been paid for months and in some cases years, no longer had the wherewithal, sir, to employ people, to rent equipment, to buy materials, to go out and do the work that it was being asked to do. There are consequences, sir, when you do not pay your bills, when you do not settle your debt. And there are real consequences for real people. When this government first came to service, sir, to the people of this country, the member for Christchurch East Central, sir, and the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael Northeast, would tell you that we could not stop receiving calls and questions from people who were owed tens of thousands, millions of dollars, and who were saying, not, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I want my money, which is a legitimate thing to say. They were saying, if we are not able to receive these resources, we are trying, but we don't know how much longer we can maintain our current complement of staff. They would say we are trying to hold on because we don't want to have to let anybody go. But sir, there are consequences. And so what these measures allow us to do are to address those outstanding debts that are connected to state-owned enterprises, to allow us to make sure that pensioners are paid, to allow us to make sure that those people who put their trust and their confidence in the capacity of a government to manage their finances, that they are not disappointed. So many of those people are relying on those resources to keep people employed, to send their grandchildren to school. We have a phenomenon in this country where we have higher levels of dependency on the incomes of the aging population. So you have grandmothers and grandfathers and great-grandmothers whose pensions are actually being used to help educate successive generations, to make sure they get something to eat before they go to school. The Honourable Member for St. Thomas knows this very well because she sees it every day. And these are the kinds of things that, separate from that very important anchor of 60% debt to GDP by 2033 that is going to allow us to keep this country focused on economic recovery. Separate from that, that is important, but separate from that, this allows us to allow people to provide for themselves and their families. I also want to make reference, sir, to something that's very important and very innovative that is also mentioned in the second schedule to this act, and it has to do with the natural disaster clause that offers both creditors and the government of Barbados protection against future debt distress that is caused by a major natural disaster. The reason this is important, sir, is that, and it gives us a 2-year reprieve in the event of a disaster with respect to interest and amortization payments related to debt. Now, last week, I believe it was, we had the privilege of attending the screening of some short films for the Blue-Green Initiative, a group of tenacious, bright, proactive young people who, like so many young people across the world, have realized that this issue of climate resilience, this issue of climate change and our own survival, is the issue of their generation. We have a duty to them to make sure we begin to address it, but it is one that they will have to confront squarely. It is the big issue of survival that their generation faces. And so they have been doing tremendous work to raise awareness about what climate resilience can look like. What does it mean? Sir, overnight in Dominica, we all know this story. That country lost 220% of its GDP. Now, the way that we have sought to address climate resilience so far, and when I say we, I mean globally, we look at issues related to adaptation and mitigation, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael South is leading tremendous effort to make sure that we are responsible for our behavior and how it affects the climate and how it affects our own survival. But the truth is that most of the measures that are being thought of do not even begin to address the scale of the issue. And I'll tell you what I mean. If we have a country the size of Barbados were to have a severe weather event of the kind that faced this region in the last couple of years, we are talking about total loss. We are talking about not just a certain percent, a small percent of what we're able to produce. We are talking about the fact that we will have to replace everything that characterizes life and livelihood for people in this country. And many of the measures that are being thought up, even some of the insurance facilities, do not really address that. And so our work as policymakers, our work as those who have been tasked with ensuring the survival of this generation and future generations, is to think of what are the kinds of things that we can do in policy, that we can build into policy, that will put us in a better position. There are fundamental human issues that you face when you wake up the next morning after a disaster like Irma or Maria. Fundamental issues of where you're going to get food and water, where you're going to get medicine, and whether you are safe and secure. And these are the things that, whatever resources you are able to mobilize, have to go towards making sure that people are safe, making sure that people can eat, making sure that people can live. To say nothing of how you get back up and running to be able to get your country going again. The majority of the losses that countries face that are related to a disaster have to do with lost production. The fact that a country cannot function, it cannot produce anything, it can't make anything, its economic infrastructure is also gone. And so when there is a disaster, a country cannot, or perhaps should not, be thinking about having immediately to continue to service debt, but instead should use whatever resources are available to make sure that people are safe and well and can start the process of rebuilding. And so this natural disaster clause is important for countries such as ours. And it is an example of how we can make sure that we use policy to address the very real issues of climate change and climate resilience. Finally, sir, I want, as gently guided by the member for Christchurch East Central, my colleague in the Ministry of Finance, to say a little bit about this matter of fiscal space and growth. In my opening, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I mentioned that this Debt Holder Amendment Act that we are debating today is about two very important things. One is that anchored as part of the BERT program. But the other is something that the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael North East, mentioned some time ago when she delivered her budget statement. And it has to do with the fact that we need some space. We need some fiscal space to be able to invest in Barbadians again. This economy, sir, did not grow for 10 years. And at the same time, there was not even the basic investment in services, in people, that would put them in a position to be able to contribute to growth. And I will tell you what I mean. We think, this Barbados Labour Party government thinks, that the fiscal space that is created by us paying down our debt, by us not having to service the debt at such high rates as before, means that we can invest for growth. What does investing for growth look like? We believe that investing in people's education and in people's health is the best platform for growth in any economy. There are those who argued, sir, that the policies that we outlined very early on, policies like having master teachers, were pie in the sky. There are even those who said that reintroducing free tertiary education was something that should not have been done. Well, I would want to say on behalf of the people in St. Michael South Central that they would beg to disagree. And I'm sure that other members in this chamber would report the same from the people who sent them here to represent them. Because that freed up some spending power that those households could now reinvest in other children, in other needs. This is not just about having fancy ideas. There are real consequences of when you make education something that people do not have to hurt their head about, and that has been the Barbadian tradition, and sir, I would humbly say it is one from which we should never deviate. That is the reason, sir, I stand before you today. That is the reason the member for St. Michael South and the member for Christchurch East Central and many of us
All of us.
stand before you today. So, Mrs. Deputy Speaker, sir, the fact is that there is actually no higher investment return, if we want to talk about investment returns, that you can get than from those in public education and public health. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the average return in the international equity markets is around 7.5%. The returns that you get to education are estimated at over 17% for primary education and 11% for tertiary education. So, in any system of mathematics, including that of the one for the Honourable, the former member for St. Lucie, in any mathematical system, there are higher returns from investing in people's education than any other investment you can make in any other market.
While I'm enjoying your speech, the rules of the House that you have 5 more minutes.
That is fine, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we believe that these are the kinds of investments that mean that those people who are well, who don't have to worry about health care, who don't have to worry about spending their own income on education, people who have the skills to participate in a new economy, those are the investments that we need in order to grow. We believe, sir, that being able to invest in infrastructure allows us to be able to grow. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we just completed a tremendous amount of work and a very significant engagement with groups of local, regional, and international investors, with whom we started a conversation